of it as you need to, but
You go.
Sure. Hang on. Let's see. Let's do
Yeah.
this.
Let's just look at it.
all right.
You ready, Matt?
How exciting. Me too.
Ready?
All right.
You want to, yeah.
Can I
What's today's date?
Oh, yeah. Why? Did you do that?
We're making this very official.
Okay. What's your name?
Nicholas Rosado, I am an anatomy tutor.
All right.
And you ought to wear, sir?
In an underground base. Okay, so starting with the tracing of a drop of blood, you're either going to be asked the finger, the toe, or one of the cerebral arteries. That's pretty much all you're going to be asked. You're not going to be tracing it through your mesenterics or your gonadal.
That's right.
That won't be asked. It's going to be fingers, toes, or somewhere in the head. So, following the tracing of a drop of blood, you have your ascending aorta, aortic arch, descending aorta. This is the entire descending aorta. It's composed in two parts. The first part is the thoracic. The second part is the abdominal. The abdominal goes into the feet by bifurcating at the common iliacs. Whenever you have a common, you should have an internal and an external, always. So if you see common, start thinking internal, external. If you see internal or you see external, start thinking there better be a common in there somewhere. That'll help remind you to make sure you get all of them listed. The internal iliac feeds the abdominopelvic organs, your groin, basically. So everything except your gonads, which are up above.
Yeah.
But it feeds everything else. Your external iliac goes into the leg. When it passes the blade of the ilium, when it passes the blade of the ilium and the pubis in that area, it becomes femoral. Femoral drops down into popliteal, and the popliteal separates into three. You have your anterior tibial and your posterior tibial, and you have your fibular or your peroneal.
That's not.
Sometimes that's not told
I don't think
in your
that's in the
list that
web
you need
book.
to know,
Yeah.
but that's okay because it doesn't go to your toes anyway.
All right.
These guys will. Now on your foot you have two arches. You have the arch on the top of your foot, which is your dorsal arch. And you have your plantar arch, which is on the bottom of your foot. Your posterior tibial goes straight into the arch. Your anterior tibial, however, makes a turn right at the top of your foot and runs for a length as an individual artery on the top before it goes into the arch. That section right there is called the dorsalis pedis.
Do we have that on there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
is
Okay.
what we need to know.
Okay, that is a need to know, dorsalis pedis. And it's clinically significant because that is where you check for a distal pulse when assessing circulation of the leg. So, after the arches,
Or
both
cap refill. That's a good one too.
cap refill works too, but you still got to check and see if you have a strong pulse. So that's circulation, and the cap refill is checking perfusion. Okay. So after your arches, it goes into your digital arteries. Now, digital arteries come off of both of them, so no matter which toe you want to go into, you can pick one. So you can either take the anterior tibial, dorsalis pedis, dorsal arch, digital artery route, or you can take the posterior tibial, plantar arch, digital artery route. Either one, they're both correct. Now, you should always learn your veins at the same time as the arteries. So I'm going to cover the veins coming back as well. First off, you have your digital veins, and then you have your arch. Now, this is just one messy arch. Our veins have messy arches, and it's all just one big, complex, screwed-up network. So we're calling the whole thing the plantar venous arches. Then it goes into your internal, or your deep venous circuit, where you're going to have your anterior tibial and your posterior tibial, and you also have your fibular peroneal. So your anterior and posterior are going to come together, and they drain into the popliteal, which drains into the femoral. A note, because it's one messy venous mess, there is no vein version of the dorsalis pedis. That's only on the arteries and only on the anterior tibial. There's no counterpart in the venous system. So you go straight into your tibials, popliteal, femoral, and then it follows the exact same pattern. So from femoral, it goes into external iliac vein, common iliac vein, and then it goes up the inferior vena cava.
How about superficial veins on the leg?
Superficial veins on the
Two
leg,
of them,
these are
right?
your shortcuts. There's the there's small saphenous, I think you're calling it now. We called it the lesser. So the small saphenous and the greater saphenous. The small saphenous shoots up right off the arches and attaches at the femoral.
At the femoral or popliteal?
At the femoral.
Okay.
So it goes from small saphenous to femoral.
All right.
Femoral. The great saphenous comes off the arches and attaches at the external iliac. So you skip everything in the leg, really. So that's your big
So it
shortcut.
goes through your pelvis then.
Yeah, and it attaches right at the external iliac.
All right.
So it goes all the way up and skips the entire leg.
So if we really wanted to, we can just do that instead of going. If we were
Yeah.
tracing a drop of blood, that
It's absolutely
saves
correct.
a lot of step.
So tracing your drop of blood in the foot, you could go ascending aorta, aortic arch, descending aorta, thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta,
External.
common iliac, external iliac, femoral, popliteal, anterior tibial artery, dorsalis pedis, dorsal arch, digital arteries, digital veins, venous plantar arches, great saphenous vein, external iliac vein, common iliac vein, inferior vena cava,
And then through the heart.
and then
Right.
through the heart. You would start, usually you start from the superior vena cava, but every now and then they'll ask from the inferior to start.
Right.
Doesn't change anything though.
Right.
You go through the heart, through the pulmonary system, through the left side of the heart, and then out through the ascending aorta. All of them are going to start with that. Where you go from there is based on whether you're going to fingers or toes. So, those are the feet. It's pretty simple. Shouldn't be too confusing looking at this thing because all these little guys sticking off, you don't need to know them. Don't worry about them. Just focus on the big things. And you should already know most of it, so this shouldn't intimidate you too much. Now, let's do the arm. On the arteries, you have a brachiocephalic on the right, but you do not have a brachiocephalic on the left. So you have your brachiocephalic artery, common carotid, subclavian. So we're going to take the subclavian. At the armpit area, it becomes the axillary, then it becomes the brachial, and the brachial separates into 3 arteries again. You have a median in the middle, but that doesn't go to the fingers, so we're not really worried about that. And you have your radial and your ulnar. Both of them go to all 3 arches, so you can pick whichever one you want, it doesn't matter. And then you can pick whichever arch you want, it doesn't matter, because all 3 come from both, and all 3 go to all of your fingers. So it's not like the foot where you have one route or the other. You have one route and you can pick whichever one you want because they keep converging and diverging again. In the arches, we have 3 arches in the hand. There's 2 palmar arches and 1 dorsal arch. So this will be the dorsal palmar arch, and these will be your, well, this will be your dorsal arch and your palmar arches, and you have a superficial and a deep. So you have a superficial palmar arch, a deep palmar arch, and a dorsal arch. And those then go into your digital arteries. So it's very similar to the foot. When you go to the venous side,
Just take the cephalic all the way up.
yeah, you can take the cephalic all the way up. But it's very similar also in that you have your digital veins and you have one venous mess. So this is going to be your palmar venous arches. And from there, you can either go through the deep or the superficial route. The deep route mirrors the arteries.
Right.
So the deep route will have the radial and the ulnar, which come together into the brachial, which goes into the axillary, which goes into the subclavian, which goes into the brachiocephalic, which goes into the superior vena cava. So it follows the exact same pattern naming convention. Now the superficial venous return comes right off of the arches and goes into either the basilic or the cephalic. The basilic goes up and attaches at the brachial or axillary. I'm not
That's
sure
what I
which
had a
one.
question about. Yeah, where if the brachial comes in, is it at the basilic or is it at the axillary?
I think the basilic is connecting to the axillary. Yeah, it's
And then,
connecting to the
where's the
axillary.
brachial coming in? At the basilic or at the
At the
axillary?
basilic
The
and then
brachial?
the basilic
Yeah.
next to the axillary.
The brachial comes right. The
Into the
brachial
basilic?
and the basilic together drain into the axillary.
So the brachial would come into the basilic, which drains into.
No, the brachial does not come into the basilic. They're parallel. The basilic and the brachial come together into the axillary.
All right.
So it's a convergence in the road.
You're saying that the brachial and the basilic.
He's a point over here.
Right.
come together into the axillary.
Mhm.
The
Okay.
larger, more clear route